Hello, Dom.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
I'm very well. It's exciting to have you with us. What crazy times!
I know, insane. I've just been doing nothing but green screens and explainers and trying to kind of get our heads around what's going on and what happens next.
It's very, very hard to get our heads around it, isn't it? But we will try. That is what we're here to try and do. I'm Mark Stone,
I'm Dominic Waghorn.
and it's Thursday, the 19th of June, day 150 of Trump's second term. And on today's episode of Trump 100, will he or won't he? Trump refuses to say whether he plans on a US strike on Iran. To discuss the latest in the conflict, I'm joined by friend of the podcast and friend of mine too, Sky's international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. Dom, thank you for joining us. It's been a while.
Mark, great to be back on the podcast. I think I was with you on day 50 out of Greenland as we were talking about Donald Trump possibly trying to take control of that territory. Now things moving in a very different direction in the Middle East. So good to be with you on day 150. You're still going strong.
Actually interesting that the Greenland thing has kind of gone quiet, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's just sort of blown over for now, hasn't it? I mean, everything has been taken up by what's happening between Iran and Israel, sucking up all the bandwidth. I think even, we're not looking at Gaza even more, even though there's been some terrible things happening there. I think the focus of, everyone's minds at the moment is what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, you're right. None of that making the headlines now because it is all eyes on Iran. Dom, you've been taking a closer look at the Iran side of this war between Iran and Israel, and that key question whether a change of leadership in Iran is both realistic and whether it's plausible. I'm really keen to get your thoughts on that. But before we get into all those details, let's start with what's happened in the past 24 hours, because, this time yesterday, the conclusion from Trump's meeting in the White House Situation Room was that he was weighing up a range of options, including a strike on Iran. Plenty's happened since then.
Yeah, and now we're waiting to see what he does next. So when he went out onto the White House lawn to, I think, talk about flagpoles being put up, new flagpoles in the White House lawn, all eyes and all ears were on what he was going to say, and we were trying to have a sort of like peer into his mind to work out what he's going to do next.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction.
Dom, you mentioned flagpoles. Just for anyone who hasn't been watching, part of Donald Trump's redesign of the White House and the grounds is two massive, massive flags on the North Lawn and the South Lawn. They really are absolutely huge. I think taller than the building itself. That was the sort of the moment today. But as you say, it was what he said about Iran that was so important. And what's interesting for me, from what we've heard from Trump, is that he is claiming that Iran wants to negotiate, that they have been in touch, and that even that they could come to the White House. But of course, against that, just yesterday, he was saying that he could, if he wanted to, kill Iran's supreme leader. Iran has shot back via social media, haven't they, today?
Yeah, they have. And they're saying quite the opposite. As we heard from, Trump saying that he was talking to the Chinese a few weeks ago, and they said, no, we're definitely not. Well, the Iranians are saying the same thing. They're issuing a statement saying no Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House. The only thing more despicable than his lies is his cowardly threat to take out Iran's supreme leader. Iran does not negotiate under duress, shall not accept peace under duress, and certainly not with a has-been warmonger clinging to relevance. Iran shall respond to any threat with a counter threat and to any action with reciprocal measures. So particularly undiplomatic talk there.
Yes.
About someone whose ally is pummeling all of their military intelligence and nuclear structures, not asking for mercy, denying any negotiations are happening, and really, I think, goading Donald Trump into doing his worst.
Well, I was going to say firm words and personal too. A has-been warmonger clinging to relevance. That's got to rile President Trump with his famously thin skin, hasn't it?
he's not going to be happy with that, and they've chosen words that I think, to particularly kind of stick the knife in and needle him. So you have to wonder what the Iranian strategy is here. That they're known for their fiery rhetoric, that they're known for particularly kind of flowery language, but they're certainly not trying to appease a man who is currently working out whether he takes this conflict to the next level and authorizes the possibility of totally destroying what remains of their nuclear facility. So it's fighting talk. And I think if you're Donald Trump, it might be enough to goad him into doing his worst.
Dom, I was going to ask you about specifically that. What is going on inside the mind of the supreme leader and those who are still alive around him? You've been there a few times, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times. So 2017 and back in January when I interviewed the foreign minister there.
Right. So what's their thinking? There is some suggestion that maybe they will back down behind this bluster. There is some suggestions that their missile strikes against Israel have reduced over the past 24 hours or so, either intentional or just simply due to the fact that they've run out. What do you think's going on inside the supreme leader's head?
Well, look, Mark, Iran is very difficult to read at the best of times. And I think, at the moment, particularly so. In terms of the missiles, we just don't know what Iran has got left. And Israel also is said to be running low on interceptors. So one theory is the Iranians are keeping their powder dry. They've got even more powerful missiles, and they're waiting for Israel to use up its interceptors. Then they're going to use those more powerful missiles to hit Israel where it really hurts. Israelis are saying they're pretty confident that they are really depleting those stocks of missiles that the Iranians have got. And the reason we're seeing less missiles being fired is they're simply running out of them. But, as things stand, the Iranians are watching their entire ballistic missile project and their nuclear project go up in smoke. So I think, my suspicion about where this plays out in these sort of coming days and weeks, so the more immediate future, is that the Iranians have a kind of a default position, which is to resist and to hunker down and to, I suspect they'll try and claim some kind of victory whenever this conflict, whenever these hostilities draws to some kind of a close. But I think they're going to try and salvage what they can of their regime and what remains of their military and nuclear infrastructure. But, the Israelis are determined to leave them with pretty much nothing left.
Yeah, and of course they're under pressure. So too, in a very different way, is Donald Trump. My sense at the moment is that he is not sure himself what he's going to do next. The messaging from him has been intentionally ambiguous. It's a guessing game for all of us, even the leaders at the G7. It was clear from the interviews they gave after Donald Trump had left that they really didn't know what he was planning on doing next, which in itself is pretty remarkable. But I think two things can be true at the same time. The ambiguity that he is displaying is helpful to him because it keeps the pressure on Iran to negotiate, to surrender, or we will annihilate you, is effectively what he's saying. But the ambiguity is also because he is in a bind. He can't work out what to do because he has different voices in each ear. His coalition is deeply divided, and not even evenly divided, I would say. Many within his MAGA base are totally against him getting in any way involved in this faraway conflict. You only have to turn on the news channels, or perhaps more sort of pertinently, you just go onto social media and spend a bit of time in the sort of right-wing echo chambers, and you will see really influential figures in the sort of the MAGA crowd who are actively saying, what on earth is Donald Trump up to here? People like Steve Bannon, his former chief strategist, and Tucker Carlson, they are two of many saying that not only is the war nothing to do with America, dangerous for America, but it totally distracts from the core objectives of Trump's vision, immigration and economics. And Dom, these are pro-Israel people who are splitting from Israel and who are angry with Donald Trump. So I think it's fascinating. Steve Bannon was even questioning why every American president, whether it be Obama or Trump, is always dragged into a forever war. He says that it is deep state infection.
What's interesting about the debate about Ukraine is that it always seems to come down to, if you listen to Rogan or if you listen to other podcasters, their major concern is that Ukraine could lead to a nuclear war, that Ukraine's trying to basically drag America into a nuclear confrontation with Russia. And I think that's a deep-seated fear, always has been in America. And I think that's obviously playing into this as well. That there must be a deep sense of unease amongst Americans, across the homeland, worried about where this is heading, as there is here as well. But you've also got the evangelical Christians, people like Huckabee, the American ambassador in
Did you see his
Jerusalem,
tweet?
saying, right. So,
Yeah.
this is the moment that God saved you for, so
Yeah.
he believes that, this is fulfilling a kind of biblical prophecy. This is the moment that, he has a kind of messianic view of his leader. And you've also got those sort of, penning op-eds in the Wall Street Journal saying, you can now make up for all the sins of Joe Biden's past. This is the moment to reassert America's power, prestige, and deterrence after the disaster of the Kabul withdrawal. So as usual with the American right, it's kind of fractured on lots of different lines.
Really
and as you
is.
say, they must be tearing Donald Trump in all kinds of directions. We say that he normally takes the advice of the last person in the room, but he must have so many people lobbying him so hard now to do one thing and the other. And you wonder whether Benjamin Netanyahu's kind of counsel and appeal might be what really swings it. He can say to Donald Trump, this is the moment where you can end Iran's nuclear program. You can end possibly the Ayatollah regime. We'll do all the heavy work, but you've just got to come in at the end, give us the B-2 bomber and the massive bunker busting bomb, and then you can take credit. And that may be tempting. I think that may be hard for the president to resist. On the other hand, he might be concerned about where that could possibly lead, because it could lead in all kinds of directions.
To that point, there are sort of memes going around already. There's one I saw where Donald Trump's face has kind of been morphed with AI into the face of George W. Bush. People reminding Americans what happened in Iraq. George Bush led America into a forever war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and they believe that Donald Trump's heading down that road as well. He's been given a range of different options by his military leaders and by his political subordinates as well, telling him, look, you can do this at one end of the scale, you could do this at the other end of the scale. He had a meeting in the Situation Room. He's had one today. He had one yesterday as well, where all these different options are being given to him. It reminds me of a story from his first term, Dom, where he ended up assassinating the Iranian head of the Quds Force of the Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani. But this was the most extreme of a range of options, wasn't it?
Yeah, the story goes that in response to the Iranians attacking the Americans in the Middle East, he said, I want to know my options. And as ever, the Pentagon comes to him with a suite of options. And he sort of looked at these options and went, I think I'll go for that one, which was the extreme option, as you say, killing Qasem Soleimani, which when it happened, we all thought, my God, what is going on here? That was a massive breach with precedent, something we've now got fairly used to, I think, with Donald Trump. But he went for the extreme option. And I think, whether he does this intentionally or not, he is someone who likes to be totally unpredictable. It's part of the way he operates. If you're in Iran, that is terrifying. It's also terrifying if you're in Pyongyang, and it would be in the Kremlin as well if you didn't feel you had a lot of control over this president. He's someone who can just do the totally unpredictable, go for the option that his planners don't really want him to go for. So if he does authorize this attack on Fordo, the big sort of mountain that contains the heart of the Iranian nuclear program, the Iranians must now think, if they hit back, what on earth is he going to do back to us? What's the Soleimani option going to be this time? And I think that will be really focusing minds in Tehran in a very different way, I think, than were it Joe Biden, who would have been more predictable, easier to read for the Ayatollahs in Tehran.
Dom, I think with that suite of options that his military men will be giving him, I guess at the most extreme end is either to assassinate the supreme leader or to use the bunker busters, these B-2 bombers, to take out this one nuclear plant in Iran. Talk to us a bit more about that and why that's so important.
Yeah, well, I think the Israelis will say that's not the extreme option. They'll say that's the obvious thing to do because, for people who haven't followed this very closely, they are trying to destroy Iran's alleged nuclear weapons program. They're doing so very effectively. But the most protected part of that program is buried a long way underground in a mountain, Fordo Mountain, which isn't that far from Tehran or Qom, the big holy city. And it's been buried there for a reason, because Iranians just don't want it ever to be attacked. So deep inside that mountain are enrichment halls full of centrifuges, trying to spin uranium to get to the point where it's useful fissile material. Now, the Israelis have 2,000-pound bunker busting bombs. They can destroy much of what they're trying to destroy, but they can't burrow deep inside this mountain. For that, they've always needed what the Americans have, which is a massive ordnance penetrator. So the Americans have a talent for naming their weapons. And this is a 13-ton bomb. It's enormous. It can plow 60 meters through concrete or rock and then go off and cause, obviously, the kind of explosion that could probably rearrange the mountain. And the plan would be to use several of those. Now, the complication with this is it can only be dropped from a B-2 stealth bomber. Now, there were some of those in Diego Garcia, the British-American base in the Indian Ocean, but they went back to America in the last few days. If they're moved back to Diego Garcia, we could read into that the fact that the president is about to authorize that operation. That, though, would be complicated for the British because it's their base. They can't veto the Americans using it for these purposes, but it would be awkward for them, and the Iranians might then say, well, we're going to punish you as well for this. And because they're the weaker ally in this partnership, arraying itself potentially against Iran, that could be much more painful for Britain than for America. And that's one reason why this has come up in the Cobra meeting, the cabinet meeting in London today, exercising minds in London.
And it may also be the reason that the British Foreign Secretary is in Washington over the next 24 hours. For what I'm told will be private meetings. There'll be no media, there'll be no appearance, but he will be here talking to his counterpart, Marco Rubio, presumably, among other things, about the use of the potential use of Diego Garcia. But that, as you say, puts Britain in a bind as well, because it would draw the UK into it. Well, Dom, we need to wrap this up soon, but you and I are both former Middle East correspondents. What we are seeing play out right now is something that we've always wondered about. We kind of knew it would happen. We didn't know when, but Iranian missiles raining down on Israel, causing huge damage. Iran taking out massive parts of Iranian infrastructure. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is. And, I was in the Middle East for 5 years. You were there for a number of years. And throughout our time, I think, it was a question always playing on our minds. Would Israel ever attack Iran? How would it deal with this threat? And when it did, if it did, what would that look like? And I think probably I expected it would be over in a night or two. I didn't think we would see what we're seeing now. Played out night after night, and we're almost sort of normalizing it. But have to remind ourselves, this is a quite extraordinary operation that has taken, literally 2 decades to plan and prepare for. And at the heart of it is this extraordinary penetration of Iran by Israeli intelligence. There was a joke that went viral on social media this week that went along the lines of, have you heard Iran has hit the Mossad headquarters, the Israeli intelligence agency's headquarters in Israel, but no one was hurt. The building was empty. All its agents were in Iran. It's making light of it, but there must be potentially thousands of Israelis inside Iran. It's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And that's been the game changer, their ability to observe this leadership, this regime in real time, and then just take it out and totally destabilize it.
But as always, in Trump world, things are moving so quickly. There is never time to stop, take a step back and actually absorb what is unfolding. Anyway, that is all we've got time for on today's episode of Trump 100. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch, the address trump100@sky.uk.
Send your questions in, and if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening from. Leave us a comment or review there too.
Dom, thanks so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on. Come back soon.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be on.
Bye.